So hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao Ias Academy. In this session we will be discussing about two important current issues. One is recent India's G20 presidency, and the second issue is Pegasus spyware. So both issues are very important for interview as well as the mains and prelims examination. So if you watch these sessions, you will develop a broad dimension about these issues. Now firstly we will talk about the G20 summit that India had the presidency in that particular G20 summit, right? So before actually discussing this, we need to understand the historical background of the G20 summit, how G20 as a grouping has evolved over a period of time. Now if you look at the G20 evolution or origin, the group owes its origin to the financial crisis 1997 and 98 of the Asian tigers. So Asian tigers had faced the financial crisis in the year 97 and 98. So this particular financial crisis has led to the establishment of the G20 grouping. Okay, so this G20 grouping has established in the year 1999 after the Asian financial crisis, right? So secondly, it worked first as a forum for the central bank governors as well as the finance ministers, right? So firstly, the heads of the states were not a part of the G20 grouping. So only the finance ministers and the governors of those member countries or developed or industrialized countries used to participate or be part of the G20 grouping after 1999. Now if you remember, in the year 2008 the world had faced the global financial crisis. So after global financial crisis, sensing the threats to the global economy, the heads of the states used to regularly meet for the G20 summit. So from 2008 onwards. So therefore from 2009 the G20 has declared as a premier forum for the international cooperation, right? Since 2009, so these heads of the state were regularly meeting once in a year and discussing the global economic challenges, prospects and the way forward, right? So this is actually the evolution of the G20 grouping. You just remember the timeline. Now after that we need to talk about the member countries. Now in UPSC prelims it is specifically asked which of the following are the member countries of the G20 grouping. So please carefully see the member countries of the G20 group, right? So firstly, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, European Union. Even though European Union is not a country, but it is also part of the G20 grouping. Now similar to European Union, the African Union had also become part of the G20 grouping, and India had taken up the initiative to include the African Union into the G20 grouping. After inclusion of African Union, the G20 had become more broader, right? So it has become more and more inclusive, representing the current realities, right? So therefore it also increases its relevance when a member country which otherwise do not have the representation, or it is underrepresented, now it is having the representation in this global forum. So therefore its relevance will also further increase. Now apart from European Union and African Union, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, so Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, United Kingdom and United States are the member countries, right? So these are the 20 member countries of the G20 grouping, and now after inclusion of African Union, G20 will become G21. Now in this context, we need to talk about India's presidency of the G20 summit in the year 2023. Okay, so India has actually hosted the G20 Leaders Summit 2023 for the first time in the history. So we all know that it is for the first time that India had hosted the G20 Summit. Since India recently celebrated 75 years of independence, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi specially requested the world leaders, particularly the heads of the states of the G20 member countries, to give India an opportunity to host the G20 Summit. So India is actually on a mission to create a shared global future, right? So India has been working on the principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the entire earth is a one family. So therefore, in this context, India is on a mission to create a shared global future with rules based order, right? So with the rules based order, peace, just growth for all, it's Amrit Kal initiative. So Amrit Kal initiative has also been launched by the government of India. Now what is Amrit Kal? Now we have recently celebrated 75 years of independence, and the year and or the time between 75 years and up to 100 years is called, this 25 years of time will be called as a Amrit Kal initiative. So what is the theme of India's G20 presidency this year? The theme is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So that is one earth, one family and one future. So this is the theme of India's the current G20 presidency, right? So after that we need to talk about the Trayoka. So what exactly the meaning of Trayoka? Trayoka is, if India is holding a presidency, then the predecessor of India as well as the successor of India includes the Trayoka. Now in this context, India's presidency, the Trayoka is the predecessor of India is Indonesia, right? So after India, Brazil will host the G20 summit. Now after that, especially we need to talk about the African representation or inclusion of African Union into the G20 and India at the India's initiative, right, to make G20 more inclusive, more broad based. India has proposed inclusion of African Union as a full-time member of the G20 grouping. So this is what India had proposed, to make the G20 grouping more broad-based, more inclusive, more multidimensional, right? So in this context we need to talk about the challenges for India's presidency, what challenges that India had faced. Now there are multiple challenges. For example, in Bali summit also there was no consensus on different issues. Similarly, the Russia-Ukraine war has been going on, so therefore achieving such consensus is also a challenge, but India had navigated those challenges in a very fair manner, and India's New Delhi summit had actually achieved the consensus among all the leaders, right? So in fact, it's various G20 meetings, India as a host has been unable to draft the final joint statement acceptable to all members due to Russia-Ukraine war. So however, the final consensus has been achieved. India successfully conducted the G20 summit. So therefore, India is one of the countries which has successfully conducted the G20 summit, has also achieved the consensus between different countries over the final joint statement, which is acceptable to the most of the countries. Now after that we need to talk about the significance of India's G20 presidency. How India's G20 presidency is significant for India and at the at the global scale. So firstly we need to talk about the climate change, India's efforts in the arena of climate change. So India's leadership in the arena of climate change particularly laudable, because India has been a strong advocate for the climate action. Now if you look at India's current position, India is a leader in the renewable energy resources, energy which is being generated from the renewable sources, despite being a developing country with lot of challenges like poverty. India has announced net zero emissions by 2070. Apart from that, India had been taking up the afforestation drives. India had been taking up several legal measures to protect the ecology, ecosystem and the biodiversity. So therefore, in this context, India had been, India had become a leader in climate change. So India is actually a strong advocate for the climate action. Now India's presidency can help set the tone for global cooperation on this issue, right? So we can achieve global cooperation over the climate change, right? So after that, the focus on inclusive growth. Now inclusive growth is also very important for particularly for the countries who are in the global south. So through global south-south cooperation, the inclusive growth can be achieved by India, right? So inclusive growth is actually a priority for India, and India's presidency will focus on key issues, for example infrastructure development, job creation, and women empowerment, gender equality, okay, so and achieving disaster resilience. So these are the issues which India is going to address, and India is going to achieve the cooperation in order to achieve inclusive growth across different countries. Now after that, we need to talk about the strategic importance of India for India because of hosting G20 summit. So it has a lot of significance because in the G20 grouping, major powers like European Union, US, China, Russia are member countries. So therefore, there are different divergence between these major powers. So therefore, India can play a key role in bringing those countries together. The presidency of G20 will provide a platform for India to engage with the major powers, for example US, China, Russia, on issues of global importance. So this provides India an opportunity to work on global issues, for example expansion of the UN Security Council seat, okay, so permanent membership. So India can work on those issues, not just that, but also reforming the multilateral institutions, multilateral financial institutions, and institutions of global governance like World Bank, WTO, IMF, everything. So India can work with these like-minded countries so that India can play an instrumental role in bringing some reform at the global scale. So after that, we need to talk about the global south as well. Now India is rightly called as the leader of the global south. So therefore India in recent past has becoming the voice of the global south. Okay, so India has become the voice of the erstwhile sidelined global south. Now global south has been facing a lot of challenges like poverty, unemployment, gender inequality, right? So therefore in this context, a country like India particularly voicing the concerns or the issues of the global south is much appreciating. And after that, India's role in quality healthcare providing. Okay, so India is always at the forefront in providing quality healthcare for the countries which are in the global south. If you look at India's total vaccine supplies to different countries which otherwise facing the equity issues, vaccine equity issues. So India had provided vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic, and in fact India is one of the largest suppliers of generic drugs to countries like Africa and even European Union and the US. So therefore India is instrumental. India has an instrumental role when it comes to ensuring universal quality and affordable healthcare services for the different sections of the populations across the globe. So therefore in this context, it is very significant and important for India is India hosting the G20 summit, right? So through hosting the G20 summit, so India can further leverage its influence, further leverage its dominance, right? So India has certain priorities. So, it provides a global platform, a global recognition to those priorities. So therefore India can earn a rightful position at the global platform. India can further strengthen its soft power. India can protect its diaspora across different countries, and India can also further strengthen its bilateral and regional relationships with the different other countries. So because of this reason, India's hosting G20 summit is very relevant and very important. Now in this context, in this India's G20 summit, there were certain initiatives that were launched. So firstly, most important initiative that was launched during this summit was India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. So this economic corridor passes through India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Mediterranean Sea, and then Europe. So this corridor is very, very important. Now this corridor involves countries like India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, European Union, France, Italy, Germany, and US as well. Right? So shipping and railway connectivity corridor. So this is actually shipping and railway connectivity corridor, and it is part of the partnership for the global infrastructure development. Okay, so this is one of the most important and most significant outcome of the G20 summit. Now in fact, US has claimed that India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor is responsible for the Hamas attack on Israel as well. Now the G20 summit has become the G21 summit, right? Because African Union now part of the 21 member of the G20 grouping. So in fact, since India has become the voice of the global south, African Union now become part of the G20 grouping. So after that, the Global Biofuel Alliance has also been launched by India, Brazil and US in this 2023 G20 summit. Okay, so the member countries which are part of the Global Biofuel Alliance, India, Brazil and US. So the overall objective of the Global Biofuel Alliance is to achieve the production of biofuels, okay, sustainable and substantial production of biofuels, right? Apart from that, other initiating members of the Global Biofuel Alliance include Argentina, Bangladesh, Italy, Mauritius, South Africa, UAE. Canada, Singapore are observers of the Global Biofuel Alliance. So 19 countries and 12 international organizations are agreed to join the Global Biofuel Alliance. Now such alliance will also help countries like India in sharing of technology, knowledge, finances, everything, right? So therefore, that could help us reduce our dependence on the conventional fuels like fossil fuels, right? So this will also significantly help meet our renewable energy targets or our Paris climate targets. Now after that, there were certain initiatives that were taken with respect to climate. So G20 high level principles on lifestyles for sustainable development was launched. A pledge to 3x renewable energy capacity globally by the year 2030 was also launched, and UK had committed to provide $2 billion green climate fund, right? So green climate fund, the overall objective is raising $100 billion, and UK committed to providing $2 billion green climate fund, right? So these are the major outcomes of the India's G20 presidency, right? So in this context, India hosting G20 presidency is very crucial and very important, particularly at this juncture where India had been playing a key role at the international platforms or international arena, and particularly in the context where India has been ready to shoulder the greater responsibility at the international stage. Okay, so this is all about India's presidency at the 2023 G20 summit. Now after that, we need to talk about the recent instances of Pegasus spyware that has been spying on on journalists, politicians and human rights activists. And there were also reports of spying on the ministers and journalists and opposition leaders and the politicians. So therefore, in this context, it is very important for us to understand about the Pegasus spyware. Now, what exactly is the Pegasus spyware? Now, it is a type of malicious software or malware. So that is actually classified as a spyware. Spyware is something which spies on our activity, right? So this is actually a malicious software, and this software is developed by an Israeli company or Israeli firm, that is NSO Group, that was set up in the year 2010, right? So an Israeli firm, NSO Group, had developed the Pegasus spyware in the year 2010. Now the Pegasus spyware is designed to gain access to the devices without knowledge of the users. Now, for example, you are using a mobile phone without your knowledge. The Pegasus has already spying on, your activity on the phone, your messages, your call logs, and your web history. Everything will be spied by the Pegasus spyware. So therefore, it can gather the first personal information and relay it back to the whoever attacks or whoever controls your device, right? So this is how Pegasus usually works, right? So it was developed by an Israeli company, NSO Group, that was launched in the year 2010, right? So when we talk about the Pegasus spyware, so it is developed and licensed by an Israeli company called NSO Group, right? So this Pegasus spyware actually infiltrates smartphones that run on both iOS and on Android operating systems, right? So both iOS and Android operating systems. So it can penetrate into the any device, and it can turn them into the surveillance devices and so it can start the surveillance once it infiltrate or attacks those devices. Now Pegasus method attack is called as a zero click attacks. So right, so zero click attack means that, so even you are not clicking on any link, you are not activating any link, so that automatically starts surveillance on you or on your activities, so which do not require any action by the user. The spyware can hack the device simply by giving a missed call or missed WhatsApp call. So once it has given the missed WhatsApp call, so it can also disappear the WhatsApp call, so that you will not have any idea about any other WhatsApp call. Now once the spyware enters the device, it installs a module to track all call logs, read messages, emails, calendars, internet history, gather location data to send the information to the attacker. Right, so this is how the Pegasus actually works. Now Pegasus is called as it is called as a zero click attacks. So the attacks of Pegasus are called as zero click attacks. Now it can be installed manually on a device over a wireless transceiver. Right, so if it fails to connect with the command and control server for more than 60 days, it self destructs and removes all traces. Right, so these one of the advanced spyware, Pegasus is one of the advanced spyware. Now if it do not connect more than 60 days with command and control, then if it automatically self destructs and removes all traces of its infiltration. Right, so even if it is being detected in the device, so then also it can self destruct itself. Right, so if it detects that it was installed on the wrong device or wrong SIM card, it can self destruct itself. Now after that, the Amnesty International had noted that despite issuing security updates, Android and iOS devices were breached. So therefore, in this context, what we should be done to protect ourselves or our devices from the attacks of the Pegasus spyware or any other spyware. Now in this context, what we have to do is, we need to regularly update our software. So this is the one thing that we can do. So ensure that the software in the devices is updated and all apps are installed through the official stores. So we should not install any malicious apps from any website. Okay, so because there's a chance of spyware getting through those apps. So therefore, whatever apps which we download, we need to download from the official stores. So no suspicious email or text should be clicked and activated. So that is also another way of infiltrating our devices with such spyware. So this is all about the Pegasus spyware, and this is very important, right? So this also indicates the growing threat to the cybersecurity and the personal information. Right, so that's all for this session. Thank you.